Hello! Today we're going to talk about quality control methods that people use to ensure that their fabric comes out exactly the way they want it to. Quality control methods for fabric. Designers must ensure that the fabric they choose meets the standards that they need. Designers will go through many types of quality assurance to determine if the fabric they are buying has the correct characteristics and to meet their needs. They will ensure that a fabric has the correct feel or hand that they will need for their fabric. It has the right color, strength and durability, and other qualities will be tested as well, if necessary. First, we'll take a look at the quality control methods used to ensure color. These ensure that the colors for a fabric are correct. These methods are used when a designer is going to a mill to make fabric specifically for them. This means that they have had a fabric developer or the designer themselves decide what color and types of fabric that they want. They will then require the mill to make those fabrics for them according to their specifications. Color, of course, is very important. Firstly, whenever assessing color, the correct light should be used. Light and color are tied together. The colors we see are defined by the lights that we see them by. This is why we cannot see color by moonlight alone, and different light sources can make the same object appear to be different colors. You can test this yourself in your home if you have different types of light bulbs. Look at one color in one room with one source of light, and then look at it another. Contrast it again by looking at it in sunlight. The same color may appear to be different colors, depending on what light source is used to view it. When testing for color quality in textiles, designers, textile developers, and color specialists use special lamps and light boxes to view color samples. These lights are full spectrum lights and mimic bright sunlight and allow colors to show very vividly. We see two options on the right. One on the top is a light box. Samples are placed in the box and viewed underneath the full spectrum light. The lamp on the bottom is a special lamp with a special bulb that has a full spectrum light and can create very bright light. It's important to use these bright full spectrum lights as they can make even very subtle differences between color much more obvious. Lab dips. Lab dips are color tests done on fabric samples before a bulk order is placed, and many times before even sample yardage is placed. Typically, when developing fabrics, designers will go through 3 stages. The development stage, in which color is defined and different patterns are defined with the mill. Then the mill will create a small sample yardage. We'll talk about that more in the next section. Then, once everything has been squared away, a bulk order is placed. That is the largest amount of fabric that will be ordered for that type of fabric, and that bulk order will go to produce the product or garments intended by the designer. Lab dips are made for solidly colored fabrics that will undergo the piece dyeing method. If you remember from our last section, piece dyeing refers to fabric that has already been knit or woven and then undergoes the dyeing process. Lab dips help to determine the correct dye mix for each fabric type used in a collection to ensure that it will match the exact color palette for that collection. Lab dips are important because different fabric that use different fiber compositions will take dye a bit differently. For example, a wool fabric may need a slightly different dye mix to achieve the same color as a silk fabric would. Lab dips provide 3 or more dye mixes that attempt to reproduce a specific color. The lab dips are sent by the mill or fabric dyeing facility and are inspected by the designer, fabric developer, or color specialist for the brand. Upon inspection, the best color match is chosen. If no lab dip works as an exact color match, the inspector will comment as to how to better the match and which lab dip is the closest, and then another round of dye tests will be performed. This process will continue until an exact match is found. The upper picture shows some examples of lab dips. They have been sent by the mill to approve the color quality. They all look the same color, but if you look closely under a special light, they all have very subtle differences, as each one represents a different dye mix. Each one of these swatches will be viewed under one of those special lamps and compared to a color swatch which acts as a control for the color. If one matches exactly, the color specialist will note which one is the exact match and send the approval back to the mill so they can use that exact dye mix for that color. If none of them match, they will add a bit of comments to the closest matching one. Say, use 5% more red. Something along those lines. Another round, again, will be produced, and this will be repeated until an exact dye mixture is found. The bottom picture shows some sample dye mixes. Yarn skein color tests. For knit fabric, or fabric that will feature yarn-dyed stripes or plaid, the yarns themselves are color tested. If we remember from the last section, yarn-dyed fabric have the yarns dyed prior to weaving and are the most common dye method to produce stripes and plaids in woven fabric. These types of fabrics require the yarn to be dyed prior to knitting or weaving, so small skeins of yarn are dyed in an attempt to match the intended color. A few different dye mixes are used, and then the best match is chosen. If no match is good enough, similar to the lab dips, comments will be made, the process repeated until an exact match is found. The yarn skeins are sent from the mill to the designer for inspection. Once a match is determined, the dye mixture will be used to move on to the bulk dyeing phase, where all of the yarns for the fabric will be dyed. Strike-offs. Strike-offs are used to ensure that the color and patterning of prints will come out correctly. Strike-offs are small samples of a printed fabric made by the mill and sent to the designer for inspection. Strike-offs can be smaller swatches or as large as a few yards of fabric. They must be large enough to contain at least a few repeats of the print design. Often, accompanying color swatches can be found outside the printed area. These better allow for the identification of a potential problem color. On the image on the right, you can see these color swatches. You see them here. They're in the selvage of the fabric. They're also here for this other print. These are all the colors that are used in the print. So if something looks off, they can be easily referred to by their number. Many times in prints, not all colors need adjustment, only one or two of the color swatches. So this allows for designers and mills to communicate clearly on what needs to be corrected color-wise with their print. The knit down. Knit downs are small samples of knit fabric that are knit together and intended to show off the color combinations and knit patterns intended for the final product. Although yarn skeins can be used to finalize the color of the yarns used for knitting fabric, many designers use both or just the knit down. The knit down can give additional information that the yarn skeins cannot, like how the final fabric will look in texture, color pattern, and in feeling. However, the downside of the knit down is if multiple colors are being used, the yarn skeins are a little bit better as the different colors can be isolated better. The hand loom. The phrase hand loom can be easily confused with any fabric woven by hand, but it has another meaning that's very specific to the textile development industry. Hand looms are created for similar purposes as the knit down. They are small samples of striped or plaid fabrics. Hand looms are made so designers can see how the colors selected for their yarns will interact with each other once woven into their stripe pattern. Hand looms allow designers to ensure the colors for their stripe or plaid patterns are as intended. This is important because colors in the yarn-dyed stripes and plaids will blend together during the weaving process. It also allows designers to get an idea of how their stripe pattern will look once woven out. Hand looms can be used to check the color and patterning of the yarn-dyed patterns, just like brocades and other multicolored jacquards as well, not just stripes and plaids, although they are the most common.